Justice Minister David Lammy has said that he is preparing to launch what he calls the most sweeping modernization of the courts in generation. The reforms set to be unveiled in Parliament today are aimed at tackling a rapidly growing backlog of criminal cases in England and Wales. Among the most controversial proposals are plans to scale back the right to a jury trial, limiting it to the most serious offences including rape, murder, manslaughter, or cases that meet a public interest threshold. Lower-level offences carrying sentences of up to 5 years could instead be handled by magistrates or a newly created division of judge-only courts. The proposals have already sparked backlash, with more than 100 lawyers warning the changes could undermine long-standing legal protections. Lammy insists the reforms are essential to prevent what he calls a total collapse of the trust in the justice system. He's also pledging £550 million over 3 years to expand victim support and help train the next generation of criminal barristers. Now for this discussion, we welcome Peter Baum. He's an editor at Weekly Blitz, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Peter, for joining us again. Good to see you. Peter, what more can you tell us about this ongoing change in UK?
Yeah, this is very pertinent level of discussion. There is no doubt that since we experienced COVID some few years ago, the jury system has been clogged up and justice is not being handed out expeditiously. And day by day, week by week, the courts are getting further blocked up with people awaiting trial. So there is a problem here. However, the solution which David Lammy is proposing is so far out of synchronisation with the British Constitution and with hundreds of years of how British justice has come to be where it is today, has received such a backlash that even though he's tried very hard today, he's been on all our major television networks trying to justify the scheme, the backlash is such that I don't think this will get off the ground in the way that David Lammy is proposing. So he recognises that there is a problem, and the problem is the number of cases that are being put aside or taking too long to come to trial. However, his solution is to destroy what would be 1,000 years of British tradition since the Magna Carta. There are other ways of achieving this. Now, the backlash has come obviously from the judiciary themselves and from ordinary folk who believe that we don't want to get to the situation as there is in the United States, where the justice system is politicized. I think we've seen it on our TV screens and in the news media since Donald Trump came into power. It was like that when Biden was in power, that judges are promoted and given roles, not because necessarily of their abilities or credibilities, but because of their political persuasion. And if we are going to have a situation in the United Kingdom, which David Lammy is proposing, whereby one person or up to 3 magistrates can determine what would have been formerly a trial by jury, then it's clear that the political persuasions of those magistrates would have an impact on the outcome of the trial. So trial by jury is certainly the fairest methodology we have in a global judicial system, and I think David Lammy will have to come back from his original plans. Perhaps he's just testing the water to see how far he's gone. It can go, and as I say, this morning he's been on all our television screens and on our major radio news broadcasts trying to justify his decision. We recognise in the United Kingdom there is a backlog and a problem, but David Lammy's solution really is not the answer.
So what do you think would be the answer? As you mentioned, many people are unsatisfied with current system and how the system is especially running since COVID. Do you think this change is inevitable, but like you mentioned, the David Lammy way is not the answer?
Well, I'll give you an example of what's happening and what could be changed. If a trial by jury starts today, the judge and the jury do not get into the court until 10:30 in the morning. Then there is a break for lunch between 1 and 2. Then there is an afternoon tea break between, I think, 2:15 and 2:30. And then the judge leaves the court at 4 o'clock. Now, if you speak to anyone in gainful employment, that's a pretty small working day. That is an absolute time that could have been used to continue the jury. So we could get, just by excuse me, the time allocated each day to a trial, we could get that, we could get that done in half the time. We could get that done in half the time. So I think an extension of the day, plus working at weekends, would expedite the situation. Furthermore, more money could be put into the system to allow more courts to open up. A number of courts were closed during COVID, and they could reinstitute those courts and get the thing going. So there are a number of ways that could be used rather than this wholesale change, which would not be, which would certainly not the answer.
What do you think is the short-term effect of this?
The short-term effect is a huge amount of people criticising the government for even assuming that this would go through without any challenge. And an already unpopular government is making itself even more unpopular by doing this. Now that's the short term, that will be the short-term effect. So I think the medium-term effect will be a reconsideration that the government will have to have with the judiciary and the police to come up with a solution that is a much better answer to the one that David Lammy is proposing. As I say,
Yes.
Extended working hours and working at weekends, opening up the courts, more money put into the system to create the to make
Yes.
legal profession more attractive.
Yes, 100%. Thank you very much, Peter, for sharing that and also highlighting how British media is covering this issue. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Peter Baum for joining us as editor of Weekly Blitz from London. Now we move on to our next news. Germany's Foreign Minister John Wadepool is to visit China on December 8th and 9th. He has confirmed the plan at the Policy Forum in Berlin, saying the trip would go ahead before the end of the year. Wadepool has been scheduled to travel to Beijing in late October for what would have been the first ministerial visit under Chancellor Friedrich Merz. But he pulled out at the last minute after China agreed to only have one of his requested meetings. Chancellor Merz, meanwhile, has said that he plans his own visit to China in the first weeks of 2026. And that's a wrap on the NewsX Eurozone. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.